as soon as you do that. All right. Well, good afternoon. We have with us Dev Sarupkar. She has 50 years of deep yogic practice, 40 of which was as a Sikh and a Sikh minister. Her journey, influenced by her Sikh roots, reflects her dedication to spiritual growth and the rising of the divine feminine. She also now empowers people to find their authentic voice, to express what it is that they want to bring forth into the world, teach people, perhaps change lives. I've known Dev Sarup for a very long time, and we kind of have a running joke. There was a friend of ours who used to call her and say, Dev Sarup. So sometimes when we call each other, I say that too. One of the ways that I knew her, and she probably uses these principles still today, is her teaching of Naad yoga, N-A-A-D yoga. And that's using the nadis inside your mouth and your tongue and pronouncing and saying sacred words in order to activate this energy, not only within your head, but within your whole body. And so in that way, it's sort of like embodying the divine wisdom of the divine feminine. So Dev Sarup, teach us.
Thank you. And I can call you Reverend Leon. So yeah, Leon and I have known each other for 25 or 30 years, and we would regularly do chanting programs at the Santa Fe Community Yoga Center. And that's where we created this deep bond of coming together in song. You know, we would do it on Friday nights to really balance ourselves from the week. So I'm going to put myself into gallery. I'm going to take myself, you know, if you want to see me in the big picture, great. And I'm going to go into gallery. So hold on, just let me do a few little adjustments here. Okay, good. So I am coming to you really as a longtime spiritualist. I remember from just being a very, very young child, recognizing some sense of the divine, but probably like a lot of us, not really, you know, many of us had that feeling, but maybe not feeling supported in that or recognized in that. So it was quite a journey. So I grew up Protestant in a predominantly Catholic neighborhood. And then was on my own journey of awakening, found yoga when I was a teenager, and got deeply into singing, and then found Kundalini Yoga and being a Sikh in my early 20s. So my journey of life has been this exploration of the divine. And then Leon contacted me a little bit ago and said, hey, you want to talk on this? I thought, okay, yeah, sure, let's do it. So what I'm talking about today is the concept of the rising of the divine feminine, and embracing the divine feminine from some concepts that have come through of in my own journey of the Adi Shakti, which is the primal feminine power, the first energy, and Kundalini, which is the dormant power within all of us that becomes awakened when we have spiritual experience. And then also from my own personal observations through my own journey of the fluctuating reverence for the feminine, and that within all of us, whatever gender we present, but that patriarchal forms and how the recognition of the divine feminine kind of went underground. And this is in part from my experience as a yoga teacher trainer and going through a historical context and also my own experiences. So, and then thinking of the theme of the woman with the alabaster jar and doing some of my own research into that, and the concept of anointing, and anointing with song. So this is the journey I have in mind, and let's see how we go. The first concept I wanted to bring forward was the connection and the divine feminine. And what I mean by connection is this sense of nurturance, of intuition, of receptivity, and then deep connection with self, with others, with nature, and the divine. And we do that in many ways, creating this sense of connection. We do this through prayer, through meditation, through breath, through forms of holistic integration of experience with the body, communion with nature and with the cycles of life, of nature, of turning of tides, and then through community and unity. And this is one way that we're creating connection now in this body coming together to spend the weekend exploring this topic. So I invite you now to go with me in a little sense of your own sense of connection. So go ahead and find a comfortable seat, and I'll lead us through a little process to come into that place, whatever that is for you, of connection. So if you're sitting in a chair or however you're sitting, I invite you to come forward a little bit so that you can feel yourself sitting rather than, falling back into the chair. Closing your eyes down to a soft gaze. And connect with your breath, feeling the flow of the breath in through the nostrils as the lungs fill. And the diaphragm presses down and the belly expands in response. And as you exhale, the reverse happens. The lungs deflate, the diaphragm lifts, the belly pulls back, and the breath comes out the nose. Scanning your body for any tension you might be holding, maybe gripping in your toes, legs, hips, torso, shoulders, arms, hands, head. And allow yourself to become present. Softening your breath. And remembering for yourself in this stillness a time of deep connection. And bring that forward into the present. Maybe you generate that sense now. Being still. Maybe it's prayer, it's meditation, nature. and sense yourself. Sense your body experience. Emotional, mental, psychological. This felt sense is a form of the divine feminine, of this intuitive, soft expression and state. And just in this last moment, feel that for yourself and what feels different in this stillness. And inhale and bring yourself present. Thank you. Leanne and I were talking about this sense of radiating when we get into that state of radiating from within. And I was feeling that when just in that little bit of practice there. So journeying on in what I have in mind for us, in my experience, and we can certainly see it everywhere, throughout history, the divine feminine has been revered as a source of wisdom, compassion, nurturing power, woven through ancient traditions all throughout time. Many, many different forms, goddess worship, matriarchal societies of the past. We don't see so many of those these days. Priestess cultures, sacred rites, festivals, temple worship, all sorts of things where the reverence for the divine has been infused in with respect for practices. And there are so many examples of different forms of the divine feminine that have been worshipped. And this is where I want to share a little slides just to get some visuals on it, which I think, which I like having some visuals. Let me get the right screen here. Let me get up to where I am. So for some nice examples here, and there are countless examples in all sorts of different cultures and religions and traditions of worshiping of the divine feminine. And here we have Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love, beauty, and desire. Some of us are familiar with Kali Ma, the fierce goddess, Hindu goddess of destruction, time, and transformation. Kali means time, or also death, darkness. Another example, Kuan Yin, compassion and mercy. Pele, Hawaiian goddess of volcanoes, fire, and light. I really enjoyed pulling up all these photos. They're really beautiful. And this, in my own exploration and preparation for this, is how in Christian tradition relating to the Holy Spirit as a feminine divine form. Which then leads me to when I thought about the divine and the divine feminine from my own perspective, the one that came to the mind for me is this goddess form of the Adi Shakti. So before we talk about that a little bit, I think then let's have a beautiful picture while we're talking about that, because I want to stay in the slides for just a few moments here. What's very interesting for me in my reflection of my own personal journey and being a teacher trainer and a yogi and a spiritualist is how there is so much reverence and worship of all these various forms of the divine feminine. And then how does that actually translate into our lives? And that will come forward as in just a moment. So the Adi Shakti is a East Indian Hindu spiritual tradition of goddess energy called the primordial energy. Adi is like first or original or primordial, and Shakti is energy, power, and Shakti is really like a feminine sense, like a creative sense. And it says to animate all things, source of creation, sustenance, and transformation. One thing that I like here is this unity of the formless and the form. It's really that point where the formless comes into form, that linking space between the tangible and the intangible. It's also linked with the Kundalini, which is this latent spiritual energy within all of us. And in yogic practices, some yogic practices, you are actively looking to awaken that energy and allow that energy to rise and feed the awakening of the experience of consciousness. I believe that happens not in isolation in any sort of spiritual form, but or path, but there are practices that people do to actually directly awaken that. So here to me is one image of the Adi Shakti, which is that formless coming into form space before we come into an anthropomorphized expression, which I grabbed a few to. Here's one. You can see this very enlightened being, feminine being in the ethers and being worshipped from down below, and this sort of formless coming into form space. I thought this image was also interesting, and they talked about the 9 forms of the Adi Shakti, of this creative energy. This image with 8 arms. Oh, she's got 10 arms there. Many arms. She's got 11 arms, no, 12 arms. Anyway, that many arm thing is common in traditions. So in my journey, we, as a Kundalini yogi, this is a mantra that is in reverence and bowing. Namo means to bow, in reverence to the Adi Shakti. So I bow to that first power, acknowledging this foundation and this force of creation. I bow to the Sarv Shakti, which is the energy all around, the surrounding energy, the omnipresent divine energy. I bow to Pritham Bhagavati, which is a goddess form, which is actually coming into form, the source of creation. And this Kundalini Mata Shakti, I bow to the creative power of the Kundalini, this divine mother power. So the awakening of our highest potential. So here we have, to this point, this recognition of connection to our own spirit and our own embodied nature of creation, of the divine. And then we have all these different forms and ways of worshiping that divine over time. And then we have this link to this concept of the Kundalini. And in yogic traditions, we talk about Kundalini, I'm saying awakening our inner power. And that Kundalini is a dormant spiritual energy by design in humans, in the subtle physiology of a human. And this is sort of in the past, the kind of sort of underground practices, that the practices that weren't brought forward commonly, like you would study with a teacher for many years, and then they would bestow certain gifts very, very privately. You had to be of a certain caste. And you'll see when you go through the history of yoga how a lot of these practices of awakening this dormant spiritual energy was sort of pushed underground. So here, in this red spot right here, this is really showing right around the third chakra. But down here, this would be this coil of the Kundalini. It's said to be a 3.5 cycle coil, and it's said to be believed to be like a sleeping serpent. And then when it is awakened, it goes down and then starts to rise through the central column, a subtle nadi, a subtle energy. I'm going to say a river of prana, of life force, goes through this central channel, awakening these energy centers of the chakra. I really like this depiction in part because it shows here at the 5th chakra this double figure 8, which is very interesting because the 5th chakra is about manifestation, about bringing things to form. And 5th chakra is big in my world as a voice specialist. This is a beautiful image. I love this image by an artist named Alex Gray. And this image is called Psychic Energy System. This is his depiction. And here you can see his own articulation of the chakra, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and also other energies throughout the body. So energy centers throughout the body, or chakras. We commonly in our common day, we think of 7, but there are countless energy centers throughout the body. This is from a yogic perspective that I'm talking, but many traditions talk about the flow of energy, the natural flow of energy in the body. Qigong in Chinese and Taoist, and all sorts of different modalities understand that there's a lot more going on in the subtle realms of our body experience than we actually recognize. And you know, this is all things that if you were to actually, you could measure this with instruments. In fact, I study Qigong. My neighbor teaches Qigong, which is great. And he's got one of these little activators that you put on your fingertips or different parts of your body, and it'll show you what level of current is going through your body. So you can measure this in those ways. But this wouldn't be something that you could see if somebody was dissected or something. You wouldn't be able to see the nadis and the flow of energy throughout the body. Just for interest, I love this image. Well, first of all, let me say we've got the central channel here is called the Sushumna, and then there's said to be 2 coils going around the Ida and the Pingala. And I always find this very interesting when we talk about from a yogic experience and the flow of energy through the body, and then we have the image of the caduceus. which you could extrapolate, is that you have the central column of the Sushumna, and then the Ida and the Pingala, which again, these are called nadis, which are rivers, and they're called, they're moving, it's channels for life force energy, for that subtle energy that we feel that moves through our body, prana. There's said to be 72,000 rivers of prana in the body. And this would be over, in the yogic understanding, over many, many, many centuries of people studying and feeling and sensing and coming up with their own understanding of what's really going on with the body and its contribution to enlightenment. And that's very key in my framing, is that our bodies are designed to create an enlightened experience, regardless of tradition, regardless of where our bodies are all designed the same. As we move to this next one, this is a sculpture on a building in Whitehall, New York. And in the understanding of the magic of the human body and the flow of energy from the base of the spine up through the Sushumna to the energy centers of the head, that ultimately what is being asked to or stimulated to radiate is the pineal gland, the epithalamus, and that from a Western medicine perspective is perceived as balancing light and dark, melatonin production, sleep patterns. And but from a spiritual perspective, it's said to be the seat of awareness and enlightenment. So I thought this one's really interesting because, again, you have the Sushumna and you have the Ida and the Pingala, the snakes. And here we have a pine cone, which suggests that pineal, Latin from the word pinea, means pine cone. So this is sort of me making these connections. I'm not the only one who's made these kinds of connections, but I appreciate the universality of understanding of what could possibly be happening in the being, in the body, and how that can show up in different ways, like the caduceus showing up in Greek and Roman times, and this showing up in architecture. How all these connections are made, I don't know, but I'm really appreciating that. So let's pause for a moment here and just checked my time. We're doing good with time, so that's great. So let's also just create another touch base with your own body experience. And let me lead you through a similar practice that we just did, but let's do it. So find your seat again. I'll walk you through this experience, coming forward in your chair a little bit. Your feet on the floor, eyes closed or soft gaze. Check your body for any tension you may be holding. If your knees are crossed or ankles are crossed, I recommend you uncross, up to you. Palms on the thighs as you wish. Again, feeling your breath. And now imagine what we just spoke about. We're speaking of this first energy, this primordial power of the Adi Shakti, this innate energy that's universal energy, recognized and over time worshipped. Songs and art and poetry to try to express this connection with the divine through the embodiment of the feminine. And now bring this sense to your own body and imagine this depiction of the Kundalini. Just give yourself this moment to imagine this column of energy from the perineum, the pelvic floor, through the center line of the body up to the head. And imagine this column of light is glowing. And feel into that space of connection we created initially. And I'd like to invite you to go with me just a step further and to recognize the magic of the body, that this energy also moves by hydraulics. So as you imagine this energy and as you breathe, squeeze the pelvic floor and the navel, tighten that whole pelvic area, and relax the breath. And relax the sensation, relax the holding. Breathe again. Inhale. And then tighten the muscles of the perineum, the navel, a slight tightening of the buttocks. And imagine this energy flowing up, this opening of this channel. Exhale. And we'll do it one more time. Inhale deeply. And squeeze. Perineum. Navel back to the spine and up. Slight at the buttocks. And relax. Staying within. And feel in yourself what's different. This felt sense. And then inhale and come to space together. So that's a very, very simple sense of activation of the magic of the body, and that we are designed for upliftment. We are designed to create this. And I believe, again, that this happens in all sorts of different ways and all sorts of different traditions. And I'm coming to you as a yogi and a Sikh. So what's fascinating for me in all of this is that what has happened is that despite this reverence for and worship of the divine feminine, through time, we've seen that a marginalization, often silenced in religious systems, favoring the divine masculine expression or a male expression, exclusion, sacred texts, rituals, leadership roles, sidelining the feminine. I see that in the tradition, in the Sikh tradition, of my tradition, that the scriptures are very he-oriented. referencing God as he, and written by men, translated by men, so it's all over the place. Lost positions for women as priestesses, healers, oracles, excluded from sacred rites. I'm not saying anything we don't know. And devaluation of feminine traits like intuition, emotional depth, connection to nature. All of these things have happened. We know this. So this came to me in two different ways that I'd like to share with you. Is one, in my experience as a Sikh from in northern India, and I converted to the religion when I was 23 and was very, very active for quite a long time. And now I'm a woman on her own doing other things. And so 2004, I had been part of the Sikh religion for 21 years, and I had been deeply trained in the concept of Adi Shakti, and that this is the essence of what it means to be a Sikh and what it means to be a spiritual person. And I was involved in community where I could play music and I could be active in anything, and felt very flowing and free in a female, as a female, in my path. So 2004 is the only time I went to India. I go to India and I'm going to the Golden Temple. And in fact, I have an image. Let me share this with you. I'm going to share screen again. This here is the Golden Temple. Amritsar. Leon, can you see that? Thumbs up? Okay, good. Thank you. So this is the Golden Temple, and it's this revered, centralized spot for all Sikhs all throughout the world. And it's this gorgeous, as you can see, Golden Temple out in the middle of this pool of water. And it's open to all four sides. And it was built in the essence and the reverence of equality. And I'm like, oh, good, I finally get to go. And here I come and I bow on the parkarma, which is this walkway around the side marble. And I bow and I go with great reverence. And here's for fun, here's a picture of me in 2004 on an elephant in Amritsar. But, I love that picture. I thought I'd share that. But here I am, a newbie in India, all excited that I get to go to the Golden Temple, this revered spot. And I found that I got more and more angry as I spent time there, because I found that women were excluded from virtually every form of seva, of every form of service. That as a musician, I could not play music. This is gorgeous. There's music playing all the time, live music. People are playing these sacred hymns, and it's just gorgeous. But I couldn't play. And I couldn't carry the scriptures. I couldn't read from the scriptures. I couldn't serve this prashad. I was excluded from virtually everything. And that shocked me, because I had been trained to revere the divine feminine, and I assumed that that's what I would experience when I got there. But it was different. And I realized, okay, I remember being kind of huffy and having my arms crossed across my chest. And I said, well, I'm a Sikh to my bones, but this is not my culture. And this long-term cultural overlay of suppressing the feminine is alive and well. The intention is there, but we have the reverence for the feminine, but how does that actually translate into real life? So I come to this image, and I apologize, this is an eye chart, but this goes back from 26,000 BC to current times, okay? So humble apologies, but here's this vast view of the yogic understanding. And it's around here in the Vedic period that we actually start getting written text that you can actually research, showing what's going on with what were the origins of yogic practices. What you see prior, Abraham was about here, 2000, just for framing. So 1800 BC would be the Vedic period where you started to see texts and understanding that you could go back and find. Prior to this time, it was a lot of carvings or archaeological understanding, and you would see back in the historic times a lot of reverence for fertility and, these goddesses, these, voluptuous goddess forms. And so there was evidence of a more matriarchal form. But when you get to around this period, and if you start studying yogic text, and this is the overlay of history, so I'm just talking from a yogic perspective, this becomes very masculine. Like when you, for example, in the Vedic period, it was very much about ritual, and that you would do sacrifices, smoke, maybe animals. I'm not sure what they were sacrificing, but sacrifice was where it was all about. And that you would gain favor with the gods and for your afterlife by doing sacrifices in ritual. And what the father would do is then want to have the son, not the daughter, do these ritualistic practices after he passed to create a favorable afterlife and maybe be reincarnated or to go on. So you see it throughout all of this. There's some feminine things going on, but it's largely suppressed. And in the training I had, and then I see it more as I've kind of moved away from my prior community, that a lot of these practices of really activating the power and strength that is innate in a human being went underground. And it was taught very, very secretly. It was reserved for certain castes. It was, and it's not until recently that these things have really started to arise. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Which then brings me to anointing with song, because I want to share one beautiful exception. And as Reverend Leon and I were talking about this before, before we came into this, when we were talking about me presenting here, a story I love is the story of Nanak, who, this is a classic depiction of Nanak as an old man with an orange or red turban, wearing orange. And he had two companions, Mardana and Bala. And this is, Guru Nanak is the genesis of the Sikh religion, but at that time, Sikh meant disciple, and he wasn't starting a religion at that time. He had been a Brahmin, and around when he was 30 years old, he said, I'm going to go out and I'm going to serve the people with song. And they traveled, he and his companions, over 30 years. These are called the Udasis, or the journeys of Nanak. And this was around 1450 to 1500, somewhere around there. And Nanak stood for many beautiful things that were a step out of what was going on at the times. He stood for equality, men and women. He stood for literacy, and many of the values that we all would appreciate was what Nanak was all about. You can spend a lot of time studying him, but just imagine let's say it's 1475. There are no cars, no bicycles, Maybe you had elephants, maybe oxen, horses, maybe. But it was a lot of walking and going on boats. And they walked for 30 years and sang. And what they would do is come across people who were having troubles in their life, and maybe they were having troubles with their crops or troubles with infertility or whatever was going on. And they would sing, and they would give prescribed song to villagers as they went along and give them songs to sing that would be healing for them. The writings of Nanak are really beautiful. There's one, Arti, the sky is the azure salver, the sun and moon are thy lamps, the stars are thy scattered pearls. What other worship could be more divine than that? And it was sort of a rebellion against, you've got to do worship in a certain way, and you're only right if you do it a certain way. And there's an anecdote that I've heard. How real is it? I don't know, but I think it embodies the essence of what I know of Nanak. Of course, here we have Mecca. And as we know, when you bow toward Mecca, like I was in the prayer room in the Amsterdam airport, and they have the little rectangle where you would put your rug and you would point it a certain way and you would bow toward Mecca. So there's an anecdote that he would bow the opposite way or another way. And naturally people would get up in arms, and he'd go, well, tell me where God is not, and I won't bow that direction. I love that spirit. So this concept I love in this link of the woman with the alabaster jar and anointing Jesus with oil and weeping on his feet and drying his feet with her hair. But this anointing with sacred sound, anointing with song for the healing of all. So, which now brings us to this sense of what's happening now. And I've got to stop share. There we go. Okay. Of what's happening now. And I believe in the rising. I like to believe in the rising of the divine feminine now, in the times that we're in and the challenges that we're in, and the advent of the information age and how quickly information is moving. And one of the blessings of that is that practices that help us create a deep connection to self and soul are burgeoning. And that many, many practices are recognizing the essence of the energy that flows in the being and how to awaken that. I believe that there's this growing recognition of the need to restore balance by integrating the divine feminine into sacred practices and into life, period. My personal belief is that a lot of the tumult, the societal cultural tumult, is that's my theory right now. My theorem is that it's in a lot of pushback, because we're pushing back against a whole essence of the divine not being recognized. And when things try to emerge, there's, what is it? For every action, there is a reaction equal and opposite. When I look about the world and do my work, that's what I put together in my own being. So there's all sorts of ways that we're seeing this. It's interesting, some of the popular people that you see. I don't know if you hear about Joe Dispenza. And he doesn't talk about Kundalini per se, but he does talk about energy activation, neuroplasticity, meditation. There's a woman named Sharon Salzberg that brings a lot of this forward. There's practices, many teachers, Hinduism, yogas, Buddhism, Taoism, things coming up into the forefront and being part of people's practices. Native American traditions, Christian mysticism, all sorts of ways that the divine feminine, as I am talking about it, which, is this recognition, this outside recognition of the divine, and then going, oh, well, wait a minute, it's inside. And when I activate that, I become more aware, I become more awakened. And why did things go underground all those years ago? And I believe, in part, at least, it's because we become empowered and we become self-sovereign. And that's a threat. As I become more empowered, as each of us become more empowered, then that becomes a threat to power structures. So reflecting on the theme of the rising of the divine feminine, honoring this transformative power of the energy in our spiritual lives and in ourselves, and deepening our own connection and empowering ourselves. So thank you for the opportunity to go on this journey with you and explore. I hope that was a useful perspective and drop in for your convocation this weekend. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave Sarup.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting for us, and it's probably pretty vital, because even as clergy, I think there's differences where we feel like we have to bring something in instead of realizing it's already here and we just have to bring it up. And I'm looking at Leslie, who's smiling and laughing, and I would love to hear what she has to say. She's our wild woman of all of us and shares a heck of a lot of wisdom from her wildness.
I agree, it's already here. And we just, need to keep acknowledging it and let it flow. And Dev, I understand that that annoyance of how so much of history has been ignored, and the female aspects of history ignored, and the ancient goddesses. It was a slur to call them Venuses. The Venus of refuge. That was a slur from a male
Really?
archaeologist. He was mocking it, and then people don't realize that, so don't call them that. It's so ingrained that coming out of it is it might feel very odd, but I really appreciate your practice and your experience at the Golden Temple. Is like, oh yeah.
Yeah, and a little more on that, Leslie, is that I was there to study classical Indian kirtan with my wonderful teacher in Delhi, right? And they knew that this was my first time at the Golden Temple. And I think I had, some little flip phone or something, I don't know. And so, and they were really caring for me, they were worried about me. And, I got sick and they're going, oh, come back to Delhi, this kind of thing. So then I'm on the phone with him and he goes, so how was your experience at the Golden Temple? Like all excited. And I'm like feeling kind of like, like this obligation to, I mean, it was lovely, but it had that whole other element to it. So, yeah, Leslie.
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation. And I find it so affirming that, there's other people in the world that, have these same experiences, facing a patriarchal, dominant, religious experience. And, just thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you, Reverend
I
Laura.
can totally resonate with your experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dave Sarup,
Yes, darling. Is that you, Rachimana?
can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Dave Sarup?
Yeah. Maybe she can't hear us. Can you hear me, Leon?
Yes.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Rahmana is at a Sufi retreat. So, and it's up in the mountains. So that's why her connection. But
I know
yes, Rahmana, we can hear you.
You can?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm confused. Yes, you can hear me? Oh, okay. Dave Sarup, I was Guru Nanak Bhajan for 25 years.
I remember.
I think not only me, but my son Haj, and I'm Sundarta's grandmother, and etc.
Yes.
Anyway,
Yes.
I was very excited to see that you were joining the Ascension Alliance today, and found your presentation helpful and triggering because of my own experience with the path. And so I want to share two things. One is, how have you dealt, or I guess I'm asking because I continue to deal with it, with the anger that can come up because of some of the stuff. And I can say that I go to the Mo mantra, the Nirbo Nirver, that there's a part of us that's beyond fear and beyond anger. That's the one. Nirver, I guess it's beyond anger. That the divinity in me is beyond anger, but my humanity is not always beyond anger. That's can be an understatement. So that's one thing, is how you personally have dealt with that. And another is to just offer that when I go back to find parts of my learning in Sikhi, which is one way Indian Sikhs often refer to Sikhism, to find the treasures that can be gleaned out of what I had to leave behind. I find Mata Gujari one of the most inspiring heroines. She just kept up after all four of her grandsons died in the struggle for freedom of religion, and before that she supported her husband in offering his life for freedom of religion, and then her son, and so she's kind of a model for me. And I wonder if you have other treasures exemplifying some of the heroines from that tradition or from the yogic traditions that you have found nurturing and supportive and helpful for you.
Yeah.
Satnam.
Sanam, thank you. I knew it was you. I'm happy to see you. It's delightful. So first of all, in dealing with anger, a big meditation for me over the past couple of years is betrayal. And I have chosen to leave my community, the same community that Richmana and I were part of, And I chose to leave that community out of a sense of I can't tolerate uh, um, uh, misogyny and abuse and different actions that I hadn't really recognized. There had been the great kaboom in my community about 4 years ago. So betrayal, I think, so Rachmana, you're asking about anger, and I'm thinking I'm taking it from this place of betrayal and learning how to integrate that into the gift of having my head turned around and the gifts that come from that and the illusions that I carried and the things that I tolerated, and then to feel betrayed by my teacher or be betrayed by my community and go, I think I'm that integration process, then to go, okay, but then these are the gifts of this, because had that not happened, I would not have had this opportunity to awaken to a self-sovereignty, which I'm still working on, but that self-sovereignty that I could, come into that place, because I might have merrily just kind of moved along for the rest of my life without this opportunity to awaken to a whole other reality. So that certainly, anger, is, I think also I would say that learning to accept my emotional experiences and not bypass them, not push them away, but to be in my emotional experiences. What was it? Like to release my shame. But there's in my experience in community and humanity, there's so much bypassing, and to be a good girl, I needed to pretend like I wasn't angry, or I wouldn't speak up because I would be, there was a way to speak, and if I went outside of it, I was a bad girl. So I'm seeing now that all of that is this gift of a new beginning, a new awakening. And I've been thinking about all of this group, in preparation for this, of independent Catholic clergy. So all of you decided that, hey, I don't want to do it in that way. The way, I could see St. Francis de Assisi from my bedroom window, in Seattle, and I know that whole world. And so, that kind of like, how do we rise above those constructs and those limitations over and over and over again? Because this affirmation of being self-sovereign and being from within is not affirmed outside of us. So we go, okay, I'm going to be in, and I feel in, okay, good. And then I get pulled out, So that's in that one. And then where do I take inspiration? I think I wouldn't point to any particular figure at this instance right now, but I take inspiration from poetry and song. And the incredible words of, I'm just thinking of Nanak, Arati, these incredible, which is somebody's trying to describe their ecstatic experience, and they try to do justice to it by putting it into words. And they go, and here, let me let you feel this through the expression of my voice, so you can get just a taste of this inspiration I had. That's my answer for that. So thank you. It's good to see you.
I'm glad
You
to
have
hear
a
you.
harmonium?
Do I have a harmonium?
I wondered if you had one nearby that you could play a shabad.
Oh,
Oh, good.
Yeah, I don't.
I was thinking about that one, man comes from the woman, he longs for the woman,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
you know that one?
I don't have a version of that. I do have Arti. I could play a little of that if we wanted, but yeah. Reverend Jenny, you were gonna say something?
Well, I certainly don't want to interrupt any kind of musical expression, so let's definitely don't forget that, because that will be exquisite, I know. Oh, I'm just thinking about how the world changes. I mean, we're talking about social justice, really, with the rise of the divine feminine. We're talking about social justice for women and girls. But, social justice is happening in all, or needs to happen in so many different realms. And, what's the role of anger, or what's the, you know, I love the Buddhist term skillful means. Like, how do you skillfully transform consciousness to be more inclusive? Um, and I think that, Rahmani, you're pointing to who or what inspires us is really helpful, because I know for myself, if I only dwell in anger about feeling repressed in any way, that's a wonderful self-fulfilling prophecy. That wheel will just keep on rolling and does not take me someplace helpful. And so it's almost like I need the conscious shock, or the it's another word, vectoring. I need something to come in, which is divine help ultimately, whether it's my prayer practice, or music, or a poem, or an archetype, or a person like you, Rahmana. So many of you, each in your moments, have uplifted me, that I mean, that is why I'm a spiritual person. Well, I can't not be that, because I'm interested in the inner worlds, but I can't survive this dimension without that help. I mean, it's just too much suffering, my own and other people's. It's just too much. So whether it's, me as a woman dealing with feeling repressed or oppressed, or just watching it happen to animals or to whatever. It's like, I don't want to dishonor anger, because I actually have seen in history that anger, in used rightly, can make transformation happen. But I personally prefer peaceful means, but it can't be peace. I mean, Gandhi's a pretty damn good example. I mean, it's a statement of no, this is unacceptable, but it's not in violence and anger. So I don't know. I'm just sitting here wrestling with that, like how to navigate that. That is really our core question, isn't it? And I think that's why we're on the spiritual path, is so we can have help dealing with this super human emotion that is going to arise when things just are not right. People are not treating each other right. So anyways, whatever. Those are my ramblings that are going on inside me as we talk.
Another OC would like to share.
I've listened to your discussion. I want to thank you all for that sharing, because I was one of those people that, in my ignorance, also was clumsy and did not appreciate the woman's role in faith. In the year 2002, Father Dennis said to me, in your scriptures, OC, you notice that in heaven there's no marriage? And I said, yes. He says, do you realize that means that men and women are equal in the presence of the Holy God? And I said, yeah, no, yes. And of course, I didn't really want that answer. And the fact is that because of his statement, I had been a Marianist for 30 years, followed the Guadalupe very intently, but I never really understood the message. The divine feminine was loving us and giving us gentleness to change our way of life so that we could be acceptable as equals in the presence of God. You know, the pain that these individuals do inflict, it's a great sadness because they are not part of the original grace of God. Right? It comes from me. And we all ask all the time in our prayers for the divine to intercede in our lives. And for the Father Dennis, I learned, and I should say the Archbishop Gundry, the message of the divine feminine was love. And all my life, I never understood that true message of where it came from. So I want to thank you for your sharing, but let you know that there are those of us who are in the total support of not only the scriptures, but also the purpose of the divine. Thank you, allowing for me to share.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Well, shall I play a little? Would you like to hear just a little of song? Okay, so
Yes.
there's a little bit of winging it going on here. So I have to sit on the floor so I can play. So you might just see the top of my head, but that's the way it rolls. And so Leanne, can you hear? You can hear the harmonium,
Yes.
and can you hear me on top of it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is a shabad or a song by Nanak that is so beautiful, and it's called Arti, which means worship. And I mentioned it. It says, it's talking about what a beautiful lamplit worship this is. Because lamps, you would light lamps and have worship and ceremony. And this is where Nanak was saying, but what a beautiful worship this is, to gaze at the stars, and the sun and the moon are the lamps, and that the stars are studded pearls, and the fragrance of sandalwood is the incense, and the wind is the fan, and all the vegetation are flowers in offering to you, to the divine. So this is I haven't played this in a long time, so it'll happen. So this is in rag, in a certain scale called Dhanasri, and a 7-beat rhythm for those of you who are interested in that. And I'll just play a little of it. little something. I haven't played that in like 2 years, so. Coming forward. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to be with you all.
Thank you.
How much more do you all have? Is it just today or tomorrow?
Oh, no. We have more. Mar Roberto is going to take us through Vespers. And then tomorrow we have another full day. And then there is some on Monday as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice that you all have found this home in this community, having been very comfortably in a spiritual community for a long time and then not. Then, you know, it's like, where do we go from here? So I'm appreciating the community of you. So
Thank you so much for saying yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Leanne called me. I'm like, okay.
Well, and I just want to let you know that various ones of us do different things at different times in terms of service and worship, and you're welcome anytime if any of that is of any meaning for you.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Leanne knows how to find me. So if anybody's interested in what this being may have to offer, I'm here. So, thank you.
Yay.
Well, anythings before I say farewell?
I think I would like to
Well,
say
I just
thank
want
you
to.
so much. Thank you. And to say that it's interesting how you have come from a different path. This morning we had a rabbi, and we have our own texts, and we seem to be in a dance all around the same idea. And I'm finding that to be really amazing. Just throwing that out there. I'm sorry, Rahmana, you had something.
Oh, thank you. Dave Sarup, I don't know if you changed your sound for playing, but I couldn't hear you very well after the singing. But that's okay. I can hear you faintly. But just to say that as Sikhs, we really honor the power of the community hugely. And as Christians and Jews, and then those of us not aligned with any ism, this co-arising of consciousness beyond any faith, to me, is a manifestation. One could call it the second coming of the Christ, or one could call it, in Buddhism, I think it's called Paticca Samuppada, the co-arising of consciousness. That to me is the Divine Mother. It is the feminine, not exclusive of the masculine. And then the other thing is just that at the end of Sikh events and yoga classes, sometimes we would always share prasad, something sweet. And so hearing you play music and hearing all these years of you pouring your love into your voice and into learning this sound current from India and these beautiful poems, and then the way you were describing it with your arms and bringing it to life for us, that to me was a very sweet prasad without leaving sugar and sticky oil on our hands.
Yeah. And thank you. And thank you for that reflection. That's really beautiful. And Martha Roberto, I'm thinking of what you were speaking to of having the rabbi speak earlier, and then your framing in the alliance of your, and then me coming in with my framing, and somebody else can, it's, in my view, it's all universal, and it's semantics, and it's what resonates and works for somebody, to bring context to being a spiritual being having a human experience. And then to what Reverend Jenny was speaking to, of how to have some solace in the insanity you know, of how do we make sense of the things that are going on around us and the things that are going on within us and the things that we witness in the way people treat each other. Ooh, you know, what else do we have but our essence of self and our connection with the divine? And yeah, so
You
thank you.
used the word semantics, and I just want to say I heard the poetry. You know, yeah, we have our different semantics, but I heard coming from you the
Mm,
poetry, the beauty of, you know, although maybe our languages are different, each one expresses their own beauty in terms of poetry, and I just
mhm.
so appreciate that.
Thank you.
And one final thought that I've said to everyone, and I'm just going to toss it to you, is I wonder what this looks like. So many young people are going beyond the gender binary. And I wonder what this feeling looks like in your tradition when one sort of moves beyond both masculine and feminine. And maybe that's a whole workshop for another day, but it's something that's on my mind.
Yeah, I'm going to speak to that just for a moment from a Sikhi perspective, and a cultural Sikhi perspective can be very conservative and very binary. Um, and then, you know, all of the sundry things that happen by not accepting the spectrum of expression. And so I think one way in the Kundalini Yoga world, we would talk about the masculine and feminine, male and female, very binary. Men were this way, women are this way, and that just lost its way when I would train. You know, I trained a lot in Iceland, and Iceland is very much in the right of the human, very, very deeply. And to come in with a binary representation of men are this way, women are that way, I can see my friend Maka with her arms across her chest going, nay, 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 nay. You know, and I'm like, okay, we got to go a different way here, you know, because they're not going to hear it. And I think, you know, this whole understanding of that, you know, the divine feminine, the divine masculine, and that we carry it all, you know, is something that I relate to. You know, I still train in Kundalini Yoga in places that resonate with me. And one of them is a very progressive yoga center in Chicago. And it's all young people. And it's a blast because they're just whatever, you know. And so you just frame it, you know, for them. So I think there's this, you know, there's the kind of the very accepting experience, and there's always this very rigid, you got to be this way, you know, thing. But yeah, you're right. That's a bigger discussion. So I just wanted to share that piece. Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Leon, for the invite. Grateful to be here with all of you.
I'm grateful I've known you all these years.
Yeah, 25 or 30, something like that. Something like that. All righty. Much love to you all.
Much love. Bye-bye.